All right, let's go ahead and create our first component. So what we're going to do is, first and foremost, we're going to say import React from React package. And that just allows us to use React. And then what we can do is create a new component in here. And it looks like this. Class, my component name, so let's call it an item, extends React.component. And in here, it takes a render method. It looks a lot like a function. And in here, it takes a return statement. So it returns something we're going to open and close with parentheses and just put an H1 in here. Hello world. Now that's nice, but you can see that this kind of isn't the right color. It kind of looks, it looks dim. And so that's basically saying it's not actually being used. So let's go ahead and use this. Now we have this React component, and the nice thing about this is we can write it just like we saw in our index.js, just like this. So let's go ahead and create a new item inside of our code. So let's remove this paragraph, and first things first, let's remove the paragraph. Let's go back to our browser and just make sure that paragraph doesn't exist. This is what it looked like before. It said change this text. I got rid of it. It's gone. Okay. Cool. So now that that's deleted, I can type item, and this is just standard XHTML, save, and it says hello world. So now I actually haven't said anything in here. I've written it in here. And I can write anything I want here. I can say hello world, and then in small letters, this is a test. And what's nice about this is we don't actually have to change it in our app. Once we set that item, we can do a lot of our logic, a lot of our processing in a component. Now let's go ahead and split this component out into its own, well, component file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just cut this, cut that, and I'm going to say import item from, and I'm going to create a new file here called my item. And we can get rid of this line as well because it's not going to be used in this file. And I'm going to create a new file in here called myitem.js. So notice that I called it myitem.js, but it's just called myitem here. When React compiles your code, it knows, it understands that this is going to be most likely a JavaScript file. Now, for instance, we specified app.css because we had to tell it, hey, by the way, don't import app.js, don't import logo.js, import logo.svg. But by default, it's going to assume JavaScript. So I created a file called myitem.js. I'm just going to paste that first line in there. And I'm going to paste this code in here as well. And let's go ahead and fix up that indentation there. That looks good. And now you can see that item is also dimmed again. It's not being used. What we need to say here is export this item so that it's importable later. Export, by default, this item. And if I go back to app.js, we're going to import item from my item. Now let's open up our terminal, and there are no errors in here. What if we typoed this? We said item 2. It says failed to compile. Item is not defined. Let's put it back to the way it's supposed to, and we don't get any sort of compile error in our terminal. Now let's go back to our browser, and it works. We have now created a component and split it into its own component file. And we can change this at any point in time. And just as an example, hello from Caleb Tallien, that's me. And it says hello from Caleb Tallien. And so now we can split out components, not just from large amounts of logic, because your app.js could get quite large. You can now split that component out into its own file, so it's more maintainable in the future. And all your logic and all your processing for this particular item in here, for this H1 that we're rendering, can go inside of your item component. So your task for this lesson is, step number 1, what I want you to do is add this, the text that I just highlighted, to your app.js. And then I want you to actually instantiate, I want you to use that component that you created. And you can copy my code. I'm not going to give you the source code necessarily, just because this is very, very simple. And it's really, really good practice to write this out so that you know that, for example, classes have curly braces, but return uses a parentheses. So go ahead and give that a try. That's step 1. Step 2 is then to take that code from your app.js and split it into your own component like I did. Once you're done with that, let's head on over to that next.